Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Fred Varco, a member of the professional activities here. Before we start, can I ask everybody to turn off their phones or turn them to silence? Today we're here to discuss avoiding war in East Asia, and hopefully it will give us some ideas how to avoid war in West Asia. And we're very pleased to have Greg Kulacki of the China Project Manager for the Global Security Program, the Union of Concerned Scientists, Hyung, President of Korea Diplomacy Plaza International Affairs Professor of Handong Global University, and former Chancellor of the Korean National Diplomatic Academy, and Saruta Sayo, President of New Diplomacy Initiative. We will start with Mr. Kulacki, and we will go to questions and answers after the three speeches. So, Greg, please.
Thank you very much. So, good afternoon, and thanks for coming. So, we have something that we're calling the Inclusive Quad. And it's a civil society response to concerns I believe we all share about the future peace and prosperity, not only of East Asia but of the entire world. We're disappointed that our governments are turning away from global cooperation and embracing national competition. We're worried that military conflict may follow. And that such a conflict could result in a nuclear war. We hear a lot of encouraging rhetoric from our governments about wanting to preserve an existing international order based on the rule of law. But they seem to have forgotten that this international order was built on one central lesson the creators of that order learned from World War II. Which is that national economic competition leads to war. In addition to creating, the United Nations system, the creators of that order also made a system for creating and managing free trade and fair trade, and a system that's now being destroyed by tariffs, by sanctions, that are motivated more by geopolitical competition than a desire to preserve free and fair trade. Now, in service of this competition, our politicians are weaponizing everything, including people's hearts and minds. And the COVID pandemic made it much easier to create the divisions and increase the suspicions that drive geopolitical competition. Because it kept the majority of the world's citizens apart. It made it difficult to trade and to talk, to associate and to cooperate, and to restore and build the trust that is essential to any functional human community. So this first meeting of our inclusive quad is an attempt to rebuild trust, community, and cooperation between the United States, the Republic of Korea, Japan, and China. Now, if our governments, for whatever reason, are currently incapable of doing this, then civil society has to step into the breach and take on this essential responsibility that our governments are neglecting. Over the next several years, we hope to strengthen and raise our voices in our respective national debates over our relationships with each other. There's a large community of think tanks in Washington and Tokyo and Seoul who work together and who constantly spit out this information and perspectives that sustain this narrative about great power competition, which they describe as some sort of natural law that we have to live with. as if it were some external force like gravity. But it's not. Great power competition is just a concept. It's a belief. It's a perception, not a fact. And perceptions can be changed. And that's what we're trying to do. We understand that compared to this large community of think tanks perpetuating this great power competition narrative, that we're underdogs, that we are under-resourced, and that we're going to have a very, very difficult time ahead of us. We understand things are likely to get much worse before they get better. But we also know that rebuilding trust and community and cooperation are essential. We cannot meet the many different challenges of this particular historical moment without trust, community, and cooperation. The challenge of responding effectively to the climate crisis, the challenge of managing new technologies like artificial intelligence, the challenge of new global pandemics that are bound to come, the challenge of adjusting international economic relationships that benefit a tiny few at the expense of the many, relationships that are just unjust and inequitable, relationships that are the source of much of the fear and anxiety that politicians want us to believe they can relieve by wasting precious human and fiscal resources, and more importantly, wasting time we don't have on building up militaries and preparing for war. So we may be political underdogs at this moment, but we also know civil society that sustains us is much larger than the elites who inform and govern us. That most ordinary people understand the necessity for trust and community and cooperation in sustaining, hopeful and successful human communities. And sooner or later, hopefully sooner, our governments will come to recognize that great power competition is a dead end. And that rebuilding a cooperative international order is not only better, but it's also possible, which is what we're going to try to demonstrate. And thanks so much for your attention.
Okay,
Turn it over to Mr.
Thank you very much. Kim-san.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Joon Kim. I'm lifelong scholar specializing on East Asian international relations, and I served two years for Chancellor of Korean National Diplomatic Academy under the MOFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And actually, I was called architect of Moon Jae-in government's regional plan, which were new Southern policy and new Northern policy. And we had for 3 days, the East Asian Quadrilateral Dialogue 2023. It started very small, and by accident somehow, I met Sayo, Saruta, and Sayo early in this year, and we connected. We want to have some kind of meeting. It's nice to find people in other country who pursue the same goal for peace. And then Saruta, Sayo, and Greg knows each other, so we connected 3. And finally, China joined, but they could not be here. But anyways, there are 2 kinds of Quad, we know that. Major League Quad is US, Japan, Australia, and India to contain. That's Major League. Our Quad is actually, US, China, Japan, and Korea wants to promote peace. There are 2 kinds of trilateral cooperation. One is Major League, of course, built from Camp David agreement between US, Japan, and China. And minor league trilateral cooperation between Greg and me and Sayo. So, and they're reinforcing new Cold War, but we want revive the peace appeal. And our KDP, actually, I'm the president of Korea Diplomacy Plaza, not even a year, but we gathered so many progressive scholars and experts, almost 80 people, a regional specialist. We're trying to express our opinion against revival of new Cold War on the Korean Peninsula as well as East Asia. You know, current situation is changing every day. I know, I actually surprised that many reporters came here, you know, in the middle of this Ukraine war and war in Israel. Thank you very much for coming. And actually, you know, I don't give much credit on this famous quote by Flavius Vegetius. He was a Roman general and military philosopher. And he said, si vis pacem para bellum, as translated into let him who desires peace prepare for war. Sounds very rational, but I don't agree with it. If we prepare war, then we cannot, you know, gain peace. So we have to find elements for building peace. And actually, this quote reverberated by President Yoon many times when he was pursuing presidency before he was elected. And deterrence is important. Every nation should have deterrence. But deterrence is not enough. And we can see that. We witness the result. Deterrence on the one hand. On the other hand, we need to pursue cooperation and engagement and peace. You know, Camp David was possible, I believe, because of strong conviction in Cold War. President Yoon's strong conviction in Cold War is big driving force behind the Trilateral Alliance. And Obama once said, right before he retired after 80 years service, he said, this is no age of genuine communications. And he lamented that. And he really meant it, I believe. And we had a really genuine communication over the past 3 days. And we want to make this as a stepping stone and beginning steps. We are going to build on it. Even though we are starting as a minor group, we are going to be a major group. And we want to have, you know, prefer or, you know, prioritized human security to national security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim-san. Saruta-san, please.
Thank you very much for coming today. My name is Sayo Saruta, president of the New Diplomacy Initiative. The New Diplomacy Initiative, we call it ND, is a think tank that marked 10th anniversary this year, aiming to carry the diverse voices that exist in Japan to diplomacy, to ensure these voices are listened, even if they differ from the voice of the Japanese government. For example, we issued a report on how to mitigate tension in the region here and how Japanese security policy need to be. The report became very popular nationwide among the people who have strong concern over the current Japanese government security policy. In September this year, DPRK leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Putin met. Japanese major media coverage expressed very strong concern that the future of military cooperation between Russia and DPRK, and also together with China, the bloc might further develop in the East Asia region. I understand the concern, but that is also a reaction to so-called US bloc, which has been strengthening its ties in recent years, including FOIP, Free and Open Indo-Pacific, followed by Quad and AUKUS and Japan-Korea-US trilateral cooperation. This policy of strengthening ties in the US side, especially in the military sphere, has led to strengthening so-called authoritarian side. We understand that the main reason for the strengthening the US side cooperation and military power is to Chinese expansionist policies. We understand responding to this is also an urgent issue. However, in the past few years, China-Russian military exercises have already been conducted around Japan, and Russia has proposed to North Korea that they should have military exercises together, also involving China. So security dilemma is already occurring in this region. When it comes to Japan, as everybody know here, military power is being strengthened in Japan as well. On the other hand, as the possibility of a Taiwan contingency has started to be reported, there is growing concern among the Japanese public about being caught up in such an event. There are extremely strong calls for easing tensions, mitigate tensions by diplomacy. You might not know about the public poll result in Japan, but according to public opinion polls in Japan, 80% of Japanese people are concerned about being involved in a Taiwan contingency, and 70% of people want to deepen relations with China through diplomacy and economy, rather than by strengthening defense capabilities in terms of security. This is a most surprising result from my perspective, but in fact, about 75% of Japanese are opposed to send self-defense forces of Japan to the Taiwan Strait in the event of contingency. 75%, by far majority. However, this voice is totally different from the government voice. You can recall that this summer in Taiwan, then Vice Prime Minister Taro Aso said, Japan must show will to fight to deter China, will to fight to deter China. The people of Japan doesn't want to send troops to Taiwan, then why do we have to show the will to fight against China, to deter China? That's so contradicted. It is very fortunate to say East Asia has yet to see a war, and war must be avoided at all costs. Simply solely expanding military power will only increase tensions, and deterrence will not work on that way. For deterrence to function, it is essential to leave room for the other side to think that its core interest will not be threatened without using military power, military force. In other words, to provide reassurance is very important. Reassurance requires diplomacy. To this end, it is important, above all, to expand channels and conduct more substantial diplomacy with a wider range of themes and quality is very, very important. Japan's urgent task with China is to establish institutionalized channels for dialogue at all levels of government, all tiers of the government of Japan and China, between Japan and China. Then it is also very important to connect with China through private sectors connection like us, such as Track 2, experts, former government officials, and legislatures, and Track 3 of grassroots people. You may see the paper which we provided today. That is our joint statement from our 3-day conference. The 3 host organizations, KDP from Korea, UCS from the United States, and our organization called New Diplomacy Initiative, is issuing this joint statement. We recognized that it is impossible to strengthen our economies, provide resilience and prosperity, support a free and open international order based on the rule of law, or bolster regional and global peace and security. If the language and behavior of our governments continues to intensify geopolitical competition and undermine regional or global cooperation, we are determined to use our capabilities as civil society organizations to provide an example, good model our governments can follow and to encourage them to change course. Today, we declare that we are united in a common purpose to promote a more inclusive approach to shared challenges that we must meet together. There is no other path to sustainable peace and prosperity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Saruta-san. Now we will open the floor to questions and answers. If you have a question, please raise your hand, come up to the microphone, and tell us your affiliation or who you work for. Does anyone want, please?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Palmer from CBS News, America. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. You mentioned that something went wrong and China wasn't represented, and that seems to me to be crucial because China's role is so important in all of this. And I guess I'd like to know what specifically you think Asian and governments can do to get around China's unwillingness to deal. I mean, I think we all admit that often the most bellicose rhetoric and difficult policies and barriers are being erected by the Chinese. So could you be specific, maybe say, list 3 things you think, constructive things that could get around China's current isolationist and difficult attitude?
It's Elizabeth?
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Mm-hmm. So as the head of what we call the China project at the Union of Concerned Scientists, I was responsible for bringing the Chinese into the dialogue. We started this project maybe just 2 months ago. And as I think most of you know, in China, organizations like ours are few and far between. And organizations like ours that participate in these kind of discussions, independent, genuinely independent organizations that participate in these kinds of discussions are an extremely small number. So it's not that there were problems. It's the only problem, I guess, was time. UCS had to get this money spent before the end of our fiscal year. We needed to hold this conference now. And there just wasn't enough time to get a sponsoring organization in China to sit up here with us. I think the important thing to recognize is that there was a lot of willingness to participate. We had fabulous discussions with the 5 Chinese who were part of the group. And there is a vibrant civil society in China with very diverse opinions who are willing to engage. And the Union of Concerned Scientists, since 1994, has had an ongoing relationship with the Chinese military and defense science community, where we've had, I would say, 200 to 300 Chinese participate in activities we've held over that period of years. So we have a deep sort of network of institutions and contacts in China, all of whom now in the post-COVID era are very much willing and anxious to start participating in events like the ones we hold. I think the important thing that we have to do is we have to create spaces that are friendly, where people are willing to say what they think, where people know they're not going to be criticized on Chinese social media for saying certain things, where dialogue can take place in a safe place. I think that's the most important thing, and that's one of the things that we're creating with this inclusive quad. We're creating a space where scholars and experts of significant standing in China can come and feel safe to talk about everything they think about with colleagues from the United States, Japan, and South Korea. So your characterization of it being them unwilling, I think is not, and maybe that's because of the way we talked about it, is not quite on base.
I'm thinking that you say you've had relations since 1994. Surely they're chillier now than ever before, and surely the opportunity for concerned scientists in China to alter or influence government policy, which is a key thing you've spoken about, has never been so diminished, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. Meanwhile, China is building up its nuclear arsenal faster than any of the other superpowers on Earth. I mean, I want to believe in your vision, but it seems to me that there are enormous obstacles.
Is it okay if I?
Yeah, of course, please.
So on the nuclear issue, China's manufacturing from satellite images, we can tell about a couple hundred new silos. And Pentagon estimates are that they're going to put missiles in those silos. Nuclear arms control is what we work on with the Chinese. Maybe 3 warheads on each of those silos. And if you add that up to their existing force, that gets them to 1,000 or something by whatever. The United States has more than that on one submarine in the Pacific. The United States is also modernizing every leg of the triad of the nuclear forces. We're also modernizing the labs. There's plans to build 80 plutonium pits a year. By the way, a plan that will never succeed just because of the infrastructure requirements are enormous. It's the biggest investment in the U.S. nuclear infrastructure since the Manhattan Project, just in that one plutonium pit production facility alone. So the idea that China's the only one building up is not true. And our relationships and the relationships of other organizations in China are just now getting back because of the ability to travel post-COVID. And the general sense so far is that nobody's opinions or attitudes or demeanor have really changed. The former director of the Chinese nuclear weapons labs, who is one of the key sort of organizers of the arms control community in China, still has his group together, and they're still engaging with people in CSAC, for example, which is the group out in Stanford. So at the non-governmental level, the activities that were going on pre-COVID are gradually restoring. So I think there's a lot more room for hope here than I think we get in the mainstream media a lot. And it's because, people like us are not in, we're not in the media that much. So I'm grateful to all of you, for coming here today.
So Mike,
Sorry, can we avoid having a ongoing discussion?
just want to know if next time there might be a Chinese
Yes.
representative.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
It's actually
Yeah.
sometimes not safe to speak out. I can
Yes.
see,
Right.
Yes. Our hope is that, over the next year, before we hold the next one of these meetings, the next time you see us, there'll be a 4th person here.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody, Kim or Saruta, want to add anything to the Chinese aspect?
But the quick one. And actually, these days, this multilateralism, wanes. Even though it's NATO or AUKUS or a trilateral relation among U.S., Japan, China, it's all multilateral, but it's not. It's a block situation. It's just one side. Even economic issues. CPTPP has a possibility to expand, but IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, is also a block situation. So I think it's crossing this line is important, including China. That's important. That's one of the mandate that we started to this. And maybe next time we will hold this conference in Seoul, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I might add a little bit about the diplomacy. I'm a very strong promoter of diplomacy here in Japan. Then when I say, diplomacy is always needed, although I understand the meaning of deterrence, and deterrence is very important, I'm very much criticized why you still talk about diplomacy with China. But, as I told you, at this, my first presentation, when we strengthen our military power, they will just make it stronger than before. So that's just a dilemma, as we know. So something else have to be done. And that is already we all come to know after the 30 years intensification of the tension, to that level right now. Then if it will continuously increase the tension, I guess, if we just continue strengthening our military power only. So it might not work, but still, that's what we have to do. That is my strong belief.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Dominguez from the Japan Times. So if I understand you correctly, my question would be, do you think then that at least some in Washington are overstating the China threat? That's my first question. If so, why? Why would then the Pentagon or Washington overstate that? And second of all, if the threat is being overstated, and this is increasing the risk of war through probably too much deterrence, then why do key U.S. Asian allies like Japan, South Korea, Australia are so keen on then jumping on the bandwagon and pushing for more and more defense spending, more and more deterrence? Thank you.
Thank you.
And your name was?
Gabriel.
Gabriel. Thank you, Gabriel. You start?
You start?
Sure. Just in terms of, and this is a personal opinion, I don't think the China threat is being overstated. China is engaging in an awful lot of threatening behavior. The Chinese government is engaging in an awful lot of threatening behavior. I think it's our response to that that's the problem. If we get in a cycle of threat, response to threat, response to threat, this spirals in the wrong direction. So you have to find a way to break that somehow. And it's, as I said in my opening statement, it's very difficult for our governments to do that now for reasons that of course make a lot of sense to politicians in particular. And this is why civil society has to step in when it's so difficult for our governments to find a way out of this reciprocal threat making that's going on. So, in my personal opinion, I don't think the threat of China is being overstated. I just think it's being responded to in a way that's not constructive.
Okay.
Yes.
Kim
Yeah.
Sang?
Actually, I have a little different opinion. It's my opinion, so I think some part is overstated. And actually, these days, pragmatists in America, realistic, they say it's just picking up or blocking foul play by China is enough to contain or enough to deal with China's rise. And this total containment is not possible, but also is not good for the U.S. I totally agree with it. And they call U.S. behavior against this, rushing to contain China is called strategic paranoia. Maybe, yes, that's true. China's behavior is threatening sometimes, but another side, it is just being bigger and being strong. Getting strong itself has a point to clash each other. I think why? Because its perspectives are different. I think U.S. perspective and China perspective about China rise is different, especially time-wise. China sees this real competition is like long-term, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. But U.S. sees this is now. If they don't stop now, and they can be overturned, or they can, fail to contain. So that's why, objectively speaking, U.S. is, doing something first, and then they're reacting later. Even though, as I said, it's China's behavior is threatening. That's what I thought. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I may, a little bit from my experience in Washington, D.C., I very often go to Washington, D.C. to try to bring the voices of the Japanese people, which is not carried by the Japanese government, to the political forum in Washington, D.C. Then this summer, I spent 1 month there. Then I had a lot of meetings with the staffers of the U.S. Congress. Then my image of the message from especially from the U.S. Congress is very, very, I don't want to use this word, but I don't know other English words to use, but so maybe hawkish, I would say, maybe hawkier, more hawkier than other average American, I would say, even experts on the field, I think. But this very strong message, is always carried from the United States to Japan, and we Japanese see the newspaper only about that kind of news, with very strong influence and impact. So that could create the atmosphere of Japan as well a lot, and also the government position of Japan as well. So then, why the discussion in the Congress is more, tougher than other average American people or even the average experts on China is maybe they have to show their strongness to the voters in order to win over counterpart at the election. Then next election is coming very soon. Presidential election is very coming soon. So even now, President Biden is trying to promote more diplomacy, as we see lots of minister-level officials visit China, these days. But I don't know how long he can continue that if, the very, say the Republican side criticize him as you're so weak and too soft. At the time maybe he might have to change it. Although he still believes diplomacy is very needed. So these kind of international politics could have very strong influence on the attitude of the information from the United States to other countries as well. So that could make the information a little bit different from the existing real situation of the United States. So that is my first point I want to say. Then the next one is about your second question. Why Japan and Korea, the allies of the United States, is trying to follow the the direction which was made by the United States and also try to just strengthen the military power here. Yes, I have same question, as you, but we since the end of the World War, we don't have any other choices, taught seriously by the government officials. Then, still now we believe that maybe the only way we can take, then there is no other model we believe, to copy or to learn from, But, from my understanding, the world is changing rapidly, not only, about us, but also about other Asian countries, in the neighborhood of China. Like a very good example is Southeast Asian countries, You might call them global south, but in the conference, somebody said like a global majority. They call us so global majority countries. I just don't want to mention about other places, but Southeast Asian countries. That is our friends. That location is very, very similar to us. Then also, they have also same problem of territorial issues and also very strong influence from the China. Also, they might be allies of the United States as well. So in the kind of same structure, they are. But they've decided already to take the neutral position between China and the United States. Then, of course, we have to develop more in order to catch up with the developed countries. So in order to do that, we cannot have war in my backyard, please. Please stop the war, here. And also, please mitigate the tension between two countries or between the two blocks, if I may say. So it's impossible for Japan to take the same positions as ASEAN countries. I understand it because we are we think, the Japanese government think we are the largest and the first ally to the United States in this region. I understand it, but we could have much more nuance when we do diplomacy with the United States. That is what I want to say. Indonesia or Malaysia said, showed concern when AUKUS was created two years ago. This might, increase the tension here. So please be careful to think about it. At the time, Japanese government said, so we are welcome to have the AUKUS in this region to stable this region. Did it make the region stable? I have some doubt on it. Then, of course, the Japanese government cannot say, we have concern, why did you make AUKUS? They cannot say that. I understand. I fully understand. But still, okay, I welcome it, but behind the scene, yes, please be careful. The ASEAN country is trying to be very neutral, and cannot take our side, then we have to think about them. Also, China might react very harshly. Russia and North Korea might, react harshly. So we have to think about that. So, if you've already decided to create it, maybe we have to strengthen diplomacy more. So have to be balanced, I guess. That is what I want to request to the Japanese government. Be nuanced, be nuanced, be nuanced.
Let me explain the Korean position briefly. Korean situation more dynamic. I should say like turbulent because, Japan has been consistent in that undercurrent movement, but Korea, depending on which government, we have had this almost like ideological warfare going on, and this right now is conservative government. They're really dependent on. They're depending their national security policy on alliance, and progressive also, including me, values alliance with the U.S. But we try to act like more autonomous way or national interest. Now Korea is a big country now. It's an important country. We want to have some autonomy. It's not really balanced between the U.S. and China. And I want to introduce to you that foreign policy, general foreign policy, I think May or June issues, they're middle powers. Middle power used to be is a size, but it's in between U.S. and China. It's not sandwiched by them. It is more like having some influence coalitions. They don't belong to neither, too dependent on India, Saudi, Indonesia, Brazil, and South America. I think my country of course, is allied with U.S., but want to have that kind of thing. Not just Japan and Korea, like France and Germany, is not really enough autonomous in some way. And I have the same kind of thought on that.
Okay, thank you. Next question from the floor, please.
Thank you, Nishimura Freelance. From the viewpoint of Japan, even how we try to improve the relationship with China, there are many problems coming up between Japan and China, like not only the Senkaku Island issue, but also the discharging water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. So if we respond directly to those issues, there will be the tensions getting high. So I think we have to buy time until we have the chance to improve those relationships. So do you have any specific idea to buying time in this, trying to deter the tension low? And if you have one, I like to hear about that. Thank you.
You want to take this one?
I would say, that there are so many themes we can discuss together with the Chinese, and not necessarily just between China and Japan. I mean, we can have a multilateral forum to discuss the issue. But everybody now know in the world that the imminent issue we have to tackle with is climate change, right? We already finished the summer, now it's okay, but it was so hot, everybody knew that. So, say I could create the multilateral cooperation mechanism in the region, not only with China and Japan, but also with Korea, of course, the United States might join us, and also Southeast Asian country, which is already located in a tropical area, which might be so hot. So, these, things seems very slow, but, to increase the timing to meet each other is very important. Then alongside with the main topic, which in this case, in my example, is the climate change, we can talk a little bit about security or a little bit about the nuclear plants, water, or whatever. So to just, increase channels, I believe. That's the way it is. That's my opinion. I don't know what you think.
So I just want to say something about Fukushima, since Ed Lyman, who's a nuclear power safety expert at UCS, wrote a book on the accident. And we've been involved in this discussion about the release of the water. And we are scientists. I'm not. I'm a political scientist, which, as we all know, doesn't really count. I mean, but most of my colleagues are physicists or biologists or chemists or geologists. And there was a very interesting moment when, on the side actually, not part of our formal agenda, where we were talking about this issue, and a Japanese physicist and a Chinese physicist were talking about the water release. And the Japanese physicist started the conversation by saying, you know, if I want to talk about this, I can't use the word contaminated water. I have to use the word treated water. And if I use the word contaminated water, I'll be criticized.
Or be
right?
fired, actually.
Yeah, this is on the Japanese side. So this is government politicization of the dialogue. And the Chinese physicist started laughing because he's experiencing the exact same thing. So if scientists were actually the ones talking about this, I think the result would be that there's problems with the Japanese system. But I think most physicists who've looked at the problem say, you know, there's no good solution to this problem, and that if some good means of dealing with this contaminated water can be found, then this is probably the direction we want to go. But there's no need to be doing this at this particular moment, according to many I've spoken to about it. And there could have been a lot more scientific exchanges between physicists in all the countries that are going to be affected. And had that happened, I think there would be far less controversy about the decisions that are being made around the release of the water. So this is an area where governments are politicizing. It's a lot like what happened with COVID. Governments are politicizing it and using the argument to sort of drive these wedges between each other. But if this were in the hands of civil society and there was no governmental interest or stake involved, I think we'd end up at more rational solutions that would be more generally accepted. And there'd be more consensus. That would be my response to your question. So there is a role for us, I think.
Let me add one more example, actually. The TPP would be the great channel, actually. You know, because China applies for TPP, then Taiwan is applying for TPP. Then if we allow, you know, the CPTPP, allow Taiwan before China, you know, China will withdraw. Then if we, you know, accept the China first, maybe China will not allow Taiwan to enter. So maybe we decide to, not decide, but, you know, we plan to take the process at the same time of China and Taiwan, then you know that could be the very strong channel to talk with both sides each other. Then you know we can know also about the situation of China. Then we can also, you know, lots of Japanese, you know, corporations have a very strong concern on China, but, you know, these kind of concerns can be also discussed in the channel of TPP application process, I think. So we could utilize the TPP as a channel, good channel, multilateral, then we can talk about something else other than security there.
Do you see any possibility of resuming trilateral leaders talk, Japan and South Korea and China?
It is planned, I believe, like it is said that it will be held in December or you know, somewhere.
Yeah,
around
Korea is a
December.
hosting country, and
Yeah.
I think they're doing it, but it's good, but it's not enough because Xi Jinping, in the near future, not gonna visit this president. Yeah, Korea.
Okay, I'd like to follow up a little bit on what you've talked about. One of the issues which I've heard is it seems that the people of the countries aren't in opposition with each other, it's mainly the governments. And I wonder if you feel that the leaders of these governments in certain circumstances have done a disservice to actually their own government and their people. And I'm thinking about President Yoon, Abe and Aso, who we mentioned, Trump and President Xi. Do you think the leadership has been a problem in creating these problems?
I think one thing is problem because in a survey, especially anti-Chinese sentiment is over 80% for three countries, South Korea, Japan, and US. So this is so attractive for politicians to use. So everybody is jumping on the bandwagon to criticize China is popular in these countries. So maybe sometimes national interest in the long term is undervalued than short term or political interest.
I would just say that the leader population question is a little more complex. It's not just one's right and one's wrong, or one's positive and one's negative. It's, as he said, you see public opinion polls and you see the negative impressions of China reflected in the popular opinion polls of all our countries. But as journalists, you all know how you ask the question depends upon the answer you get. And UCS is investigating some sort of more deep, inquisitive polling practices, and I can't remember the name of it. I would have to have our outreach people here to explain the process, where instead of asking one question, you ask sets of questions to your people you're polling, and then you derive from a sort of almost conversation-like style, a more nuanced. And when that's done in terms of where U.S.-China relations are, the surface level anxiety about China is very high, but the desire to have that relieved through cooperation is also equally high. So it's quite complex. And I think our politicians feel like, in the United States at least, and the Democrats and Biden are Biden's continued almost all of Trump's policies. He's actually made some of them quite, given them more teeth. There was one of our Chinese participants was talking about the difference between the two, and it was like with Trump, they thought, well, this is just an exceptional situation. It's like a bad storm that's coming. We're just going to wait for it to be over. And they were just profoundly disappointed that after Biden became president, there was really no change. And this is when you see things becoming much harder and China getting much more angry in its rhetoric, I think, because there was this enormous disappointment that there wasn't some relaxation. So I would put Biden on your list. And most Democrats and Republicans in Congress are united on this issue too. I just think our governments are so locked into a certain narrative, and it all has to do with this concept of competition and great power competition that's driving it, that needs to be challenged, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, the gap between leadership and the people, lay people, or the average people in Japan is huge. Then I really feel, having this kind of the activities and think tank for like 10 years, so, I really feel that the power of the government or those people who are in power is, huge, and something it's not very easy to change, I understand. In the case of Japan, that is much worse than the United States and Korea. I have to, confess that, education system doesn't teach anything about history in elementary school. They don't know anything about the history of comfort room and sexual slavery happened in committed by the Japanese soldiers at the time of Second World War, kind of thing. Then, I'm teaching at the university, one of the good universities in Tokyo, but, 80% of my class students don't know what the meaning of Taiwan contingency is. The student who took my class with the title of Diplomacy and Human Rights, I let them discuss about the Taiwan contingency. What should we do? The reaction paper from themselves said, what the meaning of Taiwan contingencies? Sorry for the people who don't write Chinese characters at all, but it said like a Taiwan and event, something very, event occurs. That the Chinese characters are written in Japanese. But they don't know how to write the Chinese characters. Then Yuji sounds people's name. There is so many Japanese man who is called Yuji, a very typical name. Is that somebody's name? That's the reaction of Japanese students who are in one of the good universities in Tokyo. So what was this, education in Japan who don't know anything about Taiwan contingencies? But leaders does want to change the subject or the way to teach to the student, because now very comfortable for them this situation is. So there is no incentive for them to change the education, as somebody said, like a media system. So should we give up? Maybe we should give up. But if we give up, there's nothing we can do. There is no future. Then we have to keep walking. That's it. So. Yeah, we have to change education to try to, mitigate, again, everything have to be mitigated, but, difference between the government and the people, and also understanding of the situation, we have to change a lot. That is my comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to share an anecdote on this education question from the meeting. There was a Chinese scholar, and everybody was sort of dumping on the students, how stupid they are, these young people, they don't care about anything. All us old people.
I'm not accusing that. I'm accusing the education system of Japan conducted by the Japanese government.
Right. But she said that there's neuroscience studies connecting people who learn about these sort of historical things in the Nanjing Massacre or Hiroshima or all these horrible things that happen in war. And, you know, you have neurological responses to this information. You want to stay away from it. You want to avoid it. And so she was saying you should have some sympathy for young people, because the reason they're not interested in history or politics or all of these things is because it's all full of this negative information, this really traumatizing information. And no wonder they run away from it, or they're not interested in it. And the same with politics. If our political discussions and our discussions about history were more hopeful. For example, one of our participants said that, you know, we talk about all these historical traumas, why don't we talk about them together? So we talk about Nanjing, and we talk about Hiroshima, and we talk about the Warsaw ghettos, and we talk about these horrible things that happen as things that happen among human beings instead of things that happen to my country or my people. These are ways of making that trauma more understandable, and it creates some sort of hope in students that participating in politics and participating in these discussions will lead to some positive outcome. And I thought that was a very interesting contribution from one of the Chinese participants. And this is when I want to talk about what's happening in China and civil society. There's a lot of these kind of discussions going on that we never hear anything about because nobody's reporting them. But there's lively debate on many, many subjects, and lots of very interesting research going on with our Chinese colleagues that engaging with them in forums like the one we're creating, it really will have a benefit, I think, if we can get this information out more to people talking about this.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid we've reached our time limit. If anybody has any final comments, please let me know now.
I like this quote, actually, from Antonio Gramsci. He's a communist, but don't consider me a communist. I'm not. He said it's a pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. I think I'm getting more pessimistic every day, but I'll try to stay positive and hope. And I found the hope in the friends and colleagues in other countries.
Maybe you should stay off the internet. Anybody else got a final comment?
Thank you very much.
Okay, I want to thank Kim-san and Kulacki-san and Saruta-san for coming here with a very informative discussion. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. We're finished.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.